Okay, we talk about the first naval battle. I think Emily was the one that said, gee whiz, we fought in the sea too, and we did. And it happened in the fall of 1861. Well, it didn't happen then, I'm just going to tell you the story. In the fall of 1861, what happened is the Confederates discovered an abandoned Union Navy yard in Norfolk, Virginia. Okay, in the fall of 1861, the Confederates discovered an abandoned Union Navy yard in Norfolk, Virginia. And in that abandoned Navy yard, where there were abandoned ships, they found an abandoned Union ship, which was called the Merrimack. It's called the Merrimack. So in the fall of 1861, the Confederates discovered an abandoned Union Navy yard in Norfolk, Virginia. And the Confederates also discovered an abandoned Union ship, which was called the Merrimack. And it had been basically burned down to the waterline. So what did you really see is all? Just a little bit that was setting over the water. The rest of it was gone. So basically a platform is what you had, okay? You only had the part of the boat that was sitting on top of the water and the little that went into the water. Well, the Confederates, who did not have any ships, raised this ship. They reconstructed the hull, and they added 4-inch iron plating to it. Okay? So the Confederates raise the Merrimack. They reconstruct the hull. In other words, they build it from the water line up with 4-inch iron plating. When they got done building it, they equipped it with 10 guns and a cast iron battering ram. So they equipped this rebuilt vessel with 10 guns and a cast iron battering ram. And when they got done redoing the Merrimack, it became more powerful than any ship that the Union had in their military. So when the Merrimack was completed and rebuilt by the Confederates, it became more powerful than any ship in the Union military. Now, one man in particular was very concerned about this new Confederate weapon, and his name was Gustavus Fox. And Gustavus Fox was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy at the time. And he was very concerned about this new weapon. So Gustavus Fox, who was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, was very concerned about this new Confederate weapon, the Merrimack, and its abilities, and the fact that it was better than any ship they had in their arsenal. And when he was asked about the severity of this new Confederate weapon, this is what he said. You don't have to write it down, but listen. He was quoted as saying, "Who is to prevent her from dropping anchor in the Potomac and throwing her 100-pound shells into the White House or battering down the halls of the Capitol?" Remember, they're not too far away from the Capitol. And he's saying, hey, who's to prevent this ship from dropping anchor right in the Potomac River outside of Washington, D.C., and throwing her 100-pound shells into the White House or battering down the halls of the Capitol with the shells? In other words, this is a dangerous thing to have within vicinity of our Capitol. Well, so what do you think the Union did at this point? You're going to have to do what? Build a battleship that's equal or better than the Merrimack. So that becomes the Union's goal, to build a better battleship that would be at least equal or hopefully better than the Merrimack. Well, the man that okayed the building of this new ship would be Secretary of the Navy, Gideon Welles. Secretary of the Navy, Gideon Welles, is going to okay the United States to build a ship equal to or hopefully better than the Merrimack. And what Welles does is he enlists the help of a Swedish inventor by the name of John Ericsson. So Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles turns to the talents of Swedish-born inventor by the name of John Ericsson and tells John Ericsson, invent us and build us a better battleship than the Confederate Merrimack. We want you to surpass the Merrimack. So he does. Ericsson designs an ironclad ship for the Union. It only has 2 guns though. But it was still better than the 10-gun ship that the Confederates had. Why? How could 2 guns be better than 10? They were revolving. They swiveled. Yeah, they were revolving guns. They could shoot in all directions. So Ericsson did design an ironclad ship. It only had 2 guns, but they would be in a revolving gun housing. In other words, they would be able to rotate. And this Union ship would be called the Monitor. The Monitor. Well, what's going to eventually happen? The Merrimack's going to meet the Monitor, and they're going to see who's better. And that happens on March 9th, 1862. March 9th, 1862, and it becomes the first naval battle of the Civil War. And Emily's right, there weren't a lot of naval battles. But this was a big one that occurred on March 9th, 1862. And on that date, the Monitor and the Merrimack met outside Hampton Roads, Virginia, in the first naval battle of the Civil War. March 9th, 1862, the Union Monitor and the Confederate Merrimack met outside Hampton Roads, Virginia, in a naval battle. Now, the 2 ships hammered at each other, hull to hull, and they fought at such a close range that the vessels collided 5 different times. So they fought hull to hull, right next to each other. And they fought at such a close range that the vessels actually collided with each other 5 times. They just hammered at each other, and hammered at each other, and hammered at each other for over 4.5 hours. 4.5 hours this went on at close range. So close that they ran into each other 5 times. Well, after 4.5 hours, the Merrimack drew off, and really neither ship could claim victory. They were so well put together, they didn't even do a lot of damage to each other. So the first naval battle of the Civil War turns out in a draw, really, into a stalemate. But both sides had impressive battleships, each to protect their own, what? Capital. Yep, very good. Okay. As we move on to the Civil War, we have to make you understand that during the Civil War, the war was really fought in 2 different parts of the country. You had the Eastern Theater of the Civil War and the Western Theater of the Civil War. What geographic thing separated the 2? What landmark or what particular thing? What? Very good. The Appalachian Mountains would be the separation between the Eastern Theater of the Civil War and the Western Theater of the Civil War. These 2 areas would be separated by the Appalachian Mountains. So, where was the first Battle of Bull Run fought? In which theater? Eastern Theater. Well, after this first Battle of Bull Run, which was fought in the Eastern Theater, the Civil War is going to shift to the Western theater. Because what's the new Union philosophy? What's their new goal? To cut to gain control of the Mississippi River and cut the Confederacy in half. So that's our next subtopic, is the Civil War in the Western theater. We're going to tell you what happens in the Western theater. And basically what we're going to do is, part one of the Civil War is going to be the Western theater. Then we'll test on that and we'll move to what? The Eastern theater. Okay. Now, there were 3 Confederate states that would be separated from the South if they gained control of the Mississippi River. What would they be? Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas. Very good. Very good, Dalton. So the Confederate states that would be separated from the South if they gained control of the Mississippi River would be Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Now, in order to do that, in order to gain control of the Mississippi River, to cut off Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas, there were 3 southern states that would need to be captured by the Union. What do you think they would be? Kentucky, Tennessee, and what? Mississippi. Very good. So in order to cut Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas away from the rest of the South, in order to gain control of the Mississippi River here, the Union would have to win victories in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi. And that'll be our concentration. Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi would have to be taken by the Union to accomplish that goal. Now the first target for the Union will be the state of Tennessee. Now, even though Kentucky is kind of considered a southern state in this conflict, you have to remember that it had strong ties from both the North and the South. Who is its biggest ambassador? Who's going to be very loyal to the North? Our old friend, the great compromiser, Henry Clay. Remember, Henry Clay is going to be from Kentucky, great compromiser. So do you think it's going to be that difficult for the North or the Union to take control of that state? No, it will not be that difficult. Tennessee, however, would be a much different story because it was a very strong southern state and it would have to be completely captured. There would be nothing but ultimate victory here to make this work. So Kentucky's not going to be too much of a challenge because of Henry Clay's influence. Because there were Northerners and Southerners, so to speak, that lived in Kentucky. But Tennessee, not so much. Very, very strong southern state with southern views. So, we'll talk about Tennessee. As the Union Army is getting organized in the east for its assault on Tennessee, Confederate General Albert Johnston is going to form a defense line just north of Nashville, Tennessee. Here's Nashville. So what he's doing here, Albert Johnston, is he's putting a big defense line here to try to keep the Union out of and from taking what? Tennessee. So while the Union Army is organizing itself in the east for an assault upon Tennessee, Confederate General Albert Johnston forms a defense line just north of Nashville. Well, Johnston was in kind of a world of hurt because he was short in both men and supplies at the time. Okay, he was short on both men and supplies. Now, to overcome this disadvantage, Johnston's going to use a strategy that's going to give the Union the impression that the Confederate force was larger than it really was. Okay? He's going to try to bluff them into holding back and trying to keep the Union from attacking those lines at Nashville. Because he believes if they attack at that point, he's going to get overrun. Because he's short of both men and supplies. Well, Johnston did two things to kind of hide the fact he was short in men and supplies. First thing he did is he ordered small cavalry raids against the Union. So in other words, he sent out his cavalry to do raids of Union lines, to attack Union lines. Now the idea behind that is, the thought process would be, well, the Union would think you had more men than you really did if you could spare your cavalry out to be doing these raids. Could they really spare the cavalry to be doing that? No, but the Union thought they must have more men if they're doing that. Second thing Johnston did is he had his troops march all about very loudly, much fanfare, very loud. So it made it sound like they had more troops on the march than they did. So they actually made more noise. They chanted, those types of things. And that strategy worked for a little bit of time as Union leaders avoided attacking the Confederate lines at Nashville. So he stalled for a little bit of time, waiting for what? What's he stalling for? Reinforcements. Okay? Well, who's the overall commander of Union troops at this point? What? Who's the overall commander? Lincoln? Oh, no, he's not even close yet. He's just a commander. Winfield Scott. Well, this is where General Ulysses S. Grant takes over on the Civil War. And I think everybody thinks that, oh, Grant was the overall commander the whole time, and he was in the fricks of everything. Not necessarily true. He's just another Union commander at this time, and it's going to be his responsibility to take the offensive against Confederate forces in Tennessee. He's going to be commanding Union troops in this effort to overrun and take control of Tennessee. So Union General Grant, after waiting for a short period of time, decides, you know what, we've waited long enough, we're going to take the offensive against these Confederate forces at Nashville. Now, there were two rivers that were close to Nashville that would be strategic points in this attack. The first one was the Cumberland River. The Cumberland River. And it flowed right through Nashville, the Cumberland River. The other river of importance in the area was called the Tennessee River. And the Tennessee River ran just west of Nashville. So there are two rivers that Grant's going to try to use to his advantage when he makes the assault upon Nashville. He's going to use both the Cumberland River, which flowed through Nashville, and the Tennessee River, which flew just west of it. Now, the bottom line is there were two important southern forts that would need to be taken to secure Tennessee. This is what Grant needed to take. The first one was Fort Henry, which was located on the Tennessee River. Fort Henry, which was located on the Tennessee River. The other fort that the Union would need to secure to take Tennessee was Fort Donelson, and it was located on the Cumberland River. And what we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to tell you how Grant, what strategy he used to try to secure both Fort Henry on the Tennessee River and Fort Donelson on the Cumberland River to see how he did that and if he was successful. Okay, so the lecture tomorrow on this assault on Tennessee. And the assault's going to be on Fort Henry and Fort Donelson. Okay, all right.